Good evening and welcome to Dead Air Live. My name is Zohar and I'll be your host this evening. Tonight we're going to be taking a short trip to Genoa, Italy. We've got some local artists with us tonight that are going to talk about a recent trip that they took to Genoa, and we will look forward to hearing about the construction and installation of an important art piece that they exhibited there. Without further ado, let's introduce our guests. Welcome to the show, Jeff Tallman and Mike Hall. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Zohar.
First, Jeff, let's start with you. I'd love just a brief introduction as to what it is that you do. I understand that you're at Emerson College. You live in New York. Tell us a little bit about what you do, your artwork.
Okay. I was trained as a composer classically, also as a pianist, and I conducted orchestras for a number of years. But at a certain point, I decided to change my work because I wanted to change my audience. I felt like I wasn't quite in touch with the audience as much as I would have liked to have been. So I moved to Prague, and in Prague I discovered that I could start doing work with raw sound itself. And my career has changed drastically in the last 10 years because of that. Now I make installations in museums, churches, large spaces, historic places, and outdoors sometimes, for instance, the Bavarian forest. I also make sculpture and visual artwork as well, which all correlate in some way or another with sound.
Fantastic. That certainly keeps you busy. And do you teach at Emerson?
I teach at Emerson, yes.
And what do you teach there?
Sound.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're an artist as well.
That's right. I'm also musically trained. I started, 40 years ago on the piano myself, and have worked in the art field as well for a long time. I've been working in my own studio for the past year. For the past 5 years, I've been developing a portfolio and working in the area of video art, specifically video feedback. And I've had a show here about 6 months ago which explained some of the things that I've been working on lately.
Excellent. Well, we'll look forward to hearing a little bit more about that later.
Thank you.
So let's talk about what brought you to Italy. I understand that, Jeff, you were commissioned to install and construct an art piece in a museum in Italy.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about what it is that you did there and what brought you there.
Okay, well, the museum was the Museo della Contemporary Art Villa Croce in Genoa, for English speakers. And I was brought there by the Bogliasco Foundation, which is a tri-country foundation which is located in New York City, in Genoa itself, actually in Bogliasco, which is right next to Genoa, and in Switzerland. And they have a residency program. And originally, back in March and April of 2007, they brought me there for a residency. And that residency blossomed into numerous visits to Genoa afterwards. And from those visits, I was able to meet with people, check out the different spaces in the town that might be a good place to put up an installation, and generally get the vibe of the city and the people, the culture a little bit better from numerous times being there. And because of this, the foundation and I decided that it would be great to put a piece up in some context which would show off something about the Genoese themselves. And because of that, the museum became interested, and then the NIME conference also, which occurred in 2008, became interested. And everything came together for this installation to go up in the museum in June of this year.
Great. Well, you mentioned a couple things that I definitely want to talk more about. One is your previous time at the foundation, but more importantly about the piece of work, which we actually will see some video a little bit later. We'll actually see that. And also you mentioned the NIME conference, which can you tell us what that stands for?
Yes, it's New Interfaces for Musical Instruments. For musical expression, excuse me, NIME. And it's a conference. This was its 8th year, its 8th annual conference. They're having another conference next year. They move around from place to place, from city to city. Generally, they're hosted by academics. It will be at Carnegie Mellon coming up in Pittsburgh in 2009.
So is it a conference that features artists like yourself?
It features all manner of new interfaces for musical expression. So there's an awful lot of computer interfacing going on, a lot of people that are interested in various aspects of controlling music through different manners, really.
And so the non-conference specifically asked for you to come and present some of your work there.
It was a formal application that I submitted. I had met some of the people that were involved with NIME, and they suggested that I make an application because they had openings for installations to go into the museum or into another space in Genoa. So of course, with the foundation's support, I was very happy to make an application, and I was lucky enough to be accepted.
Fantastic. Well, speaking of lucky enough, I understand, Mike, that you got to go along on this trip.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear how you guys got connected.
Right. Jeff and I have done work together over the years. He's asked me to help him install work in New York and in Boston. And so we've had this long-standing history of working together on special projects. And so when he suggested that I come to Genoa, of course, it sounded great. I loved the sound of it, and I loved, being there in Italy. It was just an incredible experience in its own right. But at first I was wondering, well, will I be on vacation, or will I actually benefit in some way from this? And that remains to be seen, actually, whether the check will be signed. But I went out there basically on my own, on my own dime, and so he and I discussed the details to a great degree 3 or 4 weeks before we went out, and so by the time we got there, we were pretty much settled on the design and everything we needed to do to get started.
Now, had you two worked together before?
Absolutely, yes. We've done a total of 6 installations now, I believe.
Yeah.
Excellent. Here and abroad?
5 in the U.S. 5 in the U.S.
This was the first one abroad.
Excellent. And you two met locally, I understand.
Yes, Jeff was a part of a show in Cambridge with a museum called the Art Interactive, and I was working at that institution as technical director, and so I was involved in starting up the museum and also the first show which Jeff was featured in. So that's how we met, and we've been working together ever since.
Okay. And Jeff, help me understand, why Mike?
Mike has a very special set of skills, as well as an artistic outlook on things, and because of that, it's invaluable to me to work with someone who pays strict attention to detail, who has a good humor and is willing to rip something out and put it back together again if it has to be.
At a moment's notice.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
Who will stay up 36 hours straight until he's pretty much falling asleep on his feet to get the work done. So when you find a person that works well with you in collaboration like this, it's a rare find. And so when the gigs come up, I try to make sure I take people like this, especially Mike, along if possible.
Great. So Mike, what was that phone call like? What was that conversation like when he called you and said, would you like to come?
It was an email to start off with, and I responded right away, which is out of form for me. But yeah, I remember we were talking about the details first, and then I asked him, well, who's going to pay for the plane ticket? And that discussion went on. But to me, it was always the main interest point for me was the art and creating a new experience in a museum which may not have seen these types of works in the past. I mean, this was a contemporary art museum, but in a way, they were kind of very traditional. And we struggled a bit in actually, getting some sign-off from the museum.
The Museum of Contemporary Arts.
That's right, absolutely. And on some aspects, they were very conservative. Actually.
Their previous show was Alan Capro, which is, it's not conservative in many aspects. It's coming out of happenings and Fluxus and all of that. So it's cutting edge about 40 years ago. They're very nice people, but they weren't prepared to allow us to go into the surfaces of the building to put hooks or to put things that we needed to suspend projectors and other parts of the installation, mainly because it's a historic building.
Right.
And because of that, you can't dig it up, really.
Right.
It's hundreds of years of marble and frescoes on the walls and ornate, carvings. So, we had to install a projector up on the ceiling. We can talk about it later, but imagine doing that without being able to screw into the ceiling or attach to anything.
And to keep it stable.
Yes, absolutely, and safe for people, visiting the work.
Well, you've certainly whet my appetite. I'd love to see what it is that you've put together. So while we get that video set up, can you just tell us a little bit about the piece itself?
Sure. When I was staying in Genoa, I was working on a piece for Munich. And the piece for Munich was known as Wave Shadows. That was the title of it. And I was commissioned to do that piece for a very large church there, and the name came before I went to Genoa. But there I found myself on the Mediterranean, which you'll see in the video. I found myself overlooking the Mediterranean every day as I was working on a piece called Wave Shadows. And in some way, the sea crept into that piece more and more and more and more. And I decided I really wanted to make a piece about the sea, and where better to make it for Genoa itself. With the commission to work with the Villa Croce for Nîmes, it became apparent I was going to do something with the sea because the museum is right on the sea. I shot video of the sea, I made recordings of the sea, and took that back to the studio and started working with it. I also made recordings of the room in which the piece was going to be installed when it was completely silent. And from those recordings, I can put them on the computer. I put them on the computer, and I was able to determine the resonance structure of the room. If you have a soda bottle and you blow air into it, you get a frequency out of it. Well, the same thing is going on in any room that you're in that hasn't got soundproofing in it. The wind is blowing in under the door, it's blowing in through the windows, and it's creating a very faint resonance in the space. And if you record this and put it on a computer, you're able to see bands of frequency, which are the resonance of the space.
Musical tones, actually. You could describe them as
it's a harmonic spectra of the space itself. It's kind of
you physically see that?
On the computer you can. Yeah, sure. They just pop right out, and you can select them. There's and find out.
There's like 4 or 5 tones that are specific to each room. Every room has this set of tones.
Even more, many more.
But yeah, hundreds could be. But
exactly. Yeah. It depends on how complex the structure of the room is, essentially. At any rate, you get different tunings for different spaces because they all have different sizes, just like bottles give you different tunings. So what I'm able to do then is to usually extract those frequencies and put them back into the space, creating a tuned space that is actually sounding with its own sound. And what it does is bring up the level of consciousness of the space for the person who goes into it. Because as everyone that goes into a cathedral knows, you can hear sound in a space like that, and it creates a distinct kind of impression on you. What my work attempts to do with sound is to bring up that impression into much more of a consciousness for the listener, but also then to go ahead and use that material as an expressive art tool or an art material that I shape into a created work after that. Well, this is exactly what I did with the museum, only rather than use the original sound from the museum itself, I substituted seawater but extracted frequencies that were resonant to the museum room itself. So in a sense, the room is speaking of the sea, or speaking through the voice of the sea with its own tuning. So you still have the effect of creating a sensibility in the room that is of the room, and yet it's, at the same time it's the sea that's creating the sound for you. So this was the sound, and the sound was installed in 5 channels, 4 in the corners and 1 underneath a slab of marble that was in the center of the room. In the center of the room, we had a 51-inch, 130-centimeter slab of Carrara marble, which is white marble, which has very, very small veining in it, which is almost but not quite negligible, which was very important to the piece.
That was part of your installation?
That's part of the installation, right. And it was up on gazebo feet, legs under the table that were above.
Cinder blocks, kind of.
No, they weren't cinder blocks. This is really a very specific sculptural material that was carved, actually, to support the table. It's much lighter than cinder blocks also. It's extremely light. The marble slab was put on top of that, and then above that, we put a projector. And the projector shot down in a dark room 23 scenes of the sea and 1 of the moon. And the idea was that the piece brings together different waveforms into one space. Those waveforms being the sea, sound waves from the sea, light waves from the light reflecting on the water and the light of the video itself, and also the effects of gravity, because the moon, of course, is what's making the sea move. So in a sense, the piece is very much about wave motions and their confluence, all in this one room.
Do you have a title for this work?
What was the title?
Mirror of the Moon.
Mirror of the Moon.
Mirror of the Moon. Now, would you call this piece interactive? It certainly sounds interactive, at least on some level.
It's not interactive in what some have called the radical interactive, where nothing happens if you don't interact with the piece itself. It's more interactive in the sense that as you move throughout the room, the sound changes in aspect from any specific space that you're standing in. And it's possible, if you were to stand in one place for the entire loop of the piece, which is 20 minutes, and then stand in another place, you would hear a very different program because of the stance that you're taking in the room itself. A lot of my work has to do with the motion of, or the apparent motion of sound through space. We all know that you can move sound between speakers, stereo speakers, left to right, sort of the ping pong effect. Well, if you have 5 speakers, you're able to create a network of motion through a space. And I like to think of this as being a kind of choreographic tool in which sound now has freedom to move in a space in which the motion is exactly the same as a thematic process might be melodically. In other words, motion can be thematic just as much as harmony or melody or any of the formal ideas that are used in general music.
Maybe we should look at it, and we could discuss it while we're looking.
Yes, let's do that.
Describe some of the high
I'd
points.
love to
Okay.
see some of this, please.
Maybe bring down the audio a little bit.
So that,
That is the slab of marble I was talking about. It's perfectly circular. And you can see one of the columns in the corner controls one speaker, one of the 5 speakers. And as we're panning out, we're going to see the projector, which was hanging from the exact center of the room, mounted on a circular piece of plywood with a circular mat, which creates a circular video image on the marble. So most of the work that I was involved with was creating that contraption and hanging it up on the ceiling.
so there's a projected image onto
The marble itself.
Onto the marble, you're about to see it.
And the marble is super reflective because it's white, first of all, but it also has crystal structures in it. And those crystal structures pick up the light and just push it out. Really, it has almost a 3D effect.
I see.
There's depth in it. Also, in some of the program, you could see the variegations of the marble itself. And it almost looked like you were looking through the water to the surface below, to a stone surface below.
From this angle, you can't really see the waves, but from above, as we saw it just earlier, it's very mesmerizing. It's like looking, it looks literally like sea water. And it affects you as the waves move from side to side. You kind of feel pushed, like you're in a tidal flow of some kind.
It also has a similar hypnotic effect to actually being at the beach and looking at the sea and just watching the waves come in and go out and come in and go out. They're always the same, but they're always different. They're never twice exactly the same, but there's something similar about them. It's a 20-minute loop.
now, where does the moon come in?
Well, the moon is, it's what's creating the motion of the water.
Oh, right.
So the sea itself is a mirror of the moon.
Yes.
But actually in the video I took advantage of that.
Yeah.
And there are 3 or 4 scenes near the end of the video in which I caught moonlight on the water in the video itself. I don't know if you got any of those in the video or not.
No, I didn't actually.
It was hard to shoot, I know.
Yeah.
The room was almost black.
It was almost
at that
completely
point.
pitch black. So documentation was a real challenge here.
Okay. Now, I forgot to ask this earlier. Is the museum on the sea? Is it near
Yes,
the sea?
it's right next to it.
Okay, so it's particularly relevant. Another question that occurred to me, you mentioned a lot about sound and space and frequency.
Excuse me, this is the moon right here. That's moonlight.
Okay,
It's moonlight against the water, not the picture of the moon.
right.
Right. Right, and you're seeing, those are the waves coming in on the beach.
And the sound you hear is the sound that he composed for this piece.
Oh, I see.
That's the filtering of the sound of the sea through the parameters of the room.
Well, it really is mesmerizing.
It was interesting. I've never had people stay at any, this is Alessandra, she's from the foundation. I've never had people stand in front of one of my videos for as long as they have in front of this.
Yeah.
People stayed for 40 minutes at times. I
that right?
was amazed, yeah. And it wasn't me, it was the sea they were looking at, really.
Yeah,
And it wasn't, I didn't feel like they were looking at my work at that point. It felt like they were looking at the phenomena itself.
Wow.
And I loved that about the piece, actually.
Now, were you there the whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a class that was instructed by worker, somebody who works at the museum, I believe.
One of the curators.
Curators, yeah. And so he brought his class of students in, and they were very respectful. In the video, I tried to capture some of the people's reactions.
Well, I started asking you earlier about people. You mentioned that sound can change depending on a lot of factors, the size and space of the room. Number of people probably have an impact on the sound as well.
It deadens it. Yeah, it tends to deaden it. And so when there were a lot of people in the room, I found that I did have to go and goose the sound up a little bit.
Yeah. How many people would you see in there at any one time?
There could be none, or one or two, or there might be 30. I mean, it varied continuously.
So it was a large enough room to accommodate.
On the first 2 days of the festival especially, of the conference, we really got a lot of traffic those 2 days.
Yeah.
And then the last day we got quite a bit of traffic also. It was a weekend.
Now, did you get any direct feedback from many of your audience?
People seem to really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, I'd never had so many people stay in front of a piece for as long as they did. And I think that reaction to me told me more than anything else.
Absolutely. So tell me about what we're hearing now, what the audio is.
Exactly as I described.
So the sea and...
You're hearing a composition created out of the sounds of the sea, which have been filtered to work with the resonance of this space, specifically. Unfortunately, you can't hear it in 5 channels, which makes a huge difference.
I'm sure.
It's I sort of think of it as being the difference between architecture and a plan, because everything's flattened out.
Now, how long was your piece up for?
It was a 5-day installation, which is actually relatively short.
Yeah.
Although not as short as, I did one that was once 5 hours.
Oh, wow.
So they range. They range from very short to sometimes, one is permanent, actually.
Where is that?
That's in Art Oh My, the Field Sculpture Park in upstate New York.
Oh, wonderful.
Near Ghent, New York.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's a piece over a stream.
Nice.
This is more of the moon here.
So how long did it take you to install this, to construct and install this?
Well, this is kind of an interesting story because we thought that we would have access to the museum. I arrived on a Saturday and the show was to begin on a Tuesday, I think, following. It turned out that there was a national holiday on that Monday, and Sunday the museum was closed. So we couldn't even get in until the day of the final day of the installation. But I was able to visit on Saturday when I arrived. I just got off the plane and Alessandra drove me to the museum so I could see actually what the challenges were.
The woman from the foundation.
Yes, Alessandra. She is a director, I suppose, or
resident director.
Resident director. Yeah. And she was, absolutely essential for the whole thing. I mean, an Italian translator for one thing.
All of it, everything.
Everything.
I mean, she's fantastic.
But she's a facilitator to the max. Just business, to the
I wouldn't be working in Italy if it wasn't for Alessandra. That's quite clear. Yeah.
And that's why
and for the foundation as
well.
well.
It was just like she was integral to this work. But so she got me in there and got me to talk to the people at the museum to find out exactly what was involved. The museum was hesitant about the hook. There was a hook in the middle of the ceiling that we were suspending the projector from, and there was some.
The hook that you installed
no,
there?
we did not.
Okay. It was a large metal ring that had been used to hold a giant chandelier.
Yeah.
This is an 18th century building. It was built around 1701, early 18th century, and there was a hook in it that was maybe this big, which could move in any direction because a chandelier can't be stabilized. It has to move with the wind.
Right.
So nobody had hung anything from this hook from a long time, and they didn't know how strong it was. Some old concrete, some old rusty iron, it could have just fallen out. So Alessandra got them to hoist a fire extinguisher on it.
An engineer.
An engineer
came.
To put a fire extinguisher on that hook to determine it was strong enough to hold our projector system. And that was the first obstacle.
Yeah, he cleared us for 10 kilos.
For 10 kilos, right.
And
we were like
it's 22 pounds.
Yeah, and we were like 5 pounds total. So that was fine.
Right.
But then they wanted to have a barrier around the marble sculpture. because they were fearing that,
If it
accidents
fell.
could happen.
Yeah.
It could fall and hit somebody. And then they were talking about the wires that were holding it up and how they weren't strong enough. And we're continuously, responding to these issues,
Yeah, it was-
which weren't exactly issues.
No, it was a continual problem, actually, to work through the administration to be able to get what I'd envisioned the piece to be. They were lovely people, really, but they really had some valid
Very
concerns.
concerned, yeah.
Valid concerns. But then they sort of went overboard, I think, with those concerns. And finally, the museum director came and she looked at the piece and she just said, "Oh, it's
Just leave it
okay.
the way it is."
Let it go. It's fine. This
Oh,
is
good.
good."
And we figured that we just kind of pushed them off until they saw the final piece and they could realize that it was safe and it was beautiful
Yeah.
and that they should just relax about it.
You couldn't really see it from the video, but the structure that was eventually became the structure we used to hold the projector in place, we had a cable suspended from the ring, and then we had 3 cables coming out, 2 to corners of the room and 1 back to the center of the room, and those were, I guess, about 3 meters high off the ground, 3.5 meters
10 feet,
high,
yeah.
something like this. And each of those had a screwing mechanism on it, a turnbuckle, so that we could tighten any one of them to pull the projector in any direction.
I see.
See, the registration was critical. You had to get the beam of light to be on the center of
Exactly.
exactly on the
Dead
center
center,
of
yeah.
the marble, which was in the exact center of the room. But since the hook was in the center of the ceiling, that was an obtainable goal. But these wires that were stabilizing the unit, if you put a little too much tension here, it would shift everything over that way. This was just a free-floating thing. It was just kind of like hanging from a hook at the ceiling. So it took about a day or so, and me getting up and down on ladders, going to every corner of the room to turnbuckle a little bit.
And it took 4 men to lift the marble.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
How heavy was that? It was like 3 or 4.
350.
350
I
pounds.
think, yeah,
Oh my
something
gosh.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, had you put this piece together before?
No, this was an
This was
original.
an original.
Well,
Yeah.
although we had a similar installation, some alumina.
We'd worked with video masking before, yeah, and that one we used 5 masks.
I'm
I don't
sorry,
know how we ever.
video masking, did you
Yes,
say?
That's where you use the cardboard to mask or stop the light from bleeding out from a pattern you want to form on the floor
Okay.
or lower surface.
So we had a rectangular video projected, but we used museum mat with a circle cut in it to create a
I
circular
see.
image.
Right. Okay.
But we'd worked with this before, and we had different problems with that installation. But there, at least, we could go into the ceiling,
Right.
so everything could be attached and firm.
We weren't even allowed to go to the hook. We weren't even, if we were 5 feet away from the hook, so we couldn't even get to the top of the ceiling. So there were a lot of challenges that, were kind of artificially imposed, perhaps. There just wasn't a ladder tall enough
Right.
for us to go up there.
And of course, you couldn't do a dry run. This was a
No.
No, it
learning
had to
on the
be-
job,
yeah,
as it
in
were.
fact-
All the preparation, I remember, working with the calculator just to figure out exactly how big the hole would be, how high it would be from the marble, and all of this within a tolerance, so that I knew we could put it up there within like 2 inches, and we could adjust it up and down. But within 2 inches, it would be in the exact right place, and that was all prediction. I mean, we did this in the garage at the Baliasco Foundation. We just, on Sunday and Monday, we couldn't go to the museum, so we just kind of
We worked horizontal.
sketched it out, and we did it upside down. We projected on the ceiling instead of on the floor, and we put it up and it worked. That's quite amazing, actually.
Wow. So let's hear a little bit about, what was it like to see your work completed?
Well, it's a very special piece. I hadn't done any video since 2006, I think. And I really, I wanted to come back with a very strong video that had a very strong conceptual basis to it. So to bring all of this together, the 4 different waveforms, and to have the foundation really helping out tremendously, I couldn't have asked for better support, actually. I mean, artists, if you're really good, apply to the Boliasco Foundation, the Liguria Study Center, and they will have a space for you. It's very difficult to get in. It's very competitive. I was very fortunate to get in, and now that I have, they've been just wonderful to me, and
So
continuingly.
when you say get in, there is sort of an
application process.
for like to be an artist in residence.
Exactly, yeah.
In their space.
Yeah.
I understand they have some villas, and
They have
artists are welcome.
3 villas on the Mediterranean, right here actually. What this is not a great image of it, but 3 villas on the Mediterranean. They've got 4-star cuisine. They've got waiters. They've got your linen service, everything.
We were treated very well,
Yeah.
actually.
You stayed there.
It's a real,
We stayed there, and
Yeah.
there were no residencies at that time, so we
Okay.
were kind of alone in the place.
Okay.
it's a fantastic place.
So typically an artist is invited to come and stay for a month,
Yes,
all expenses paid,
yes.
and they do their artistry.
They're given a studio and they're given a room to stay in. They can take a spouse or significant other if they like. And that person is also, if there's space available, given space to work in as well.
Fantastic.
And they take care of everything. They give you train and bus tickets into town, even back and forth. They take you on little junkets to different places. If you're into the Italian Riviera, if you've ever been or haven't been, I suggest you try it out.
Yeah.
Just the place itself, not necessarily Bogliasco, the foundation, but the place is fantastic.
Right. So Bogliasco is the name of the town and the name of the foundation.
The foundation is the Bogliasco Foundation.
Yeah.
The study center is the Liguria Study Center.
Liguria
And
Study
Liguria is the region to the east and west, including Genoa.
Right. And we
Kind of
should
like the county of Genoa.
Something
Okay.
like that, the region.
and at some point during the show we'll have the website up for that as well. I think it's liguriastudycenter.org.
Yes.
I believe.
Yep.
Right, okay. And so you were there a couple years ago. You spent a month
I was there in 2007.
In 2007?
Yeah.
Okay. And were there other artists there at the time?
Yes, absolutely. They take more besides artists. They also take classicists, translators, writers, poets. Basically, it's the humanities.
Fantastic, great. And where do they get their monies from?
Well, it's a foundation. So they raise funds as a nonprofit, and they have an endowment of a certain amount. I'm not sure even what it is.
But typically in European countries, the endowments would be much larger than you'd see in the U.S. I mean, it's kind of a different environment there, isn't it?
Well, but they're in 3 countries, and they have to adapt to the laws of each country to make. It's very complicated, actually. Financially, I think the structure is not easy to describe. The president, Jim Harrison, though, has been absolutely fantastic in getting this entire process going. It's 10 years old now, and they've been bringing in maybe 50 or 60 artists a year, and it's quite successful, actually.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I want to bring us back to the piece for a second. Mike, what was it like for you to be there and to be working on this? I know that you're also an engineer, you're a video artist. And
Well, it was a huge honor, and I felt as if I was being regarded as like a visiting dignitary in a way, because well, the renowned artist, brings one person from the United States who can help him, and so I felt like I was in a special position, and people treated me very, very kindly. And I also felt that basically whatever I said or whatever I wanted, it was possible, and that they would make it possible. So, all I'd have to say is La Scala, and then they'd get the ladder, And so I learned these little Italian phrases, which helped me out. But yeah, people were very respectful, and actually, there were a number of calls for me to sign up for fellowship myself, although apparently I think that the competition is too strong for my emerging artist career, but I don't think that was just being nice to me. I think that they were just kind of like very grateful that I was there and able to help.
A big part of it is it's Italy, and when you're brought
Very
in,
gracious.
when you're brought into a place like this, you're welcomed. You're very much welcomed in the old world manner, to the point where if you keep going, you become familia. You become Signor Jeff, not just Jeff.
Right.
You're given a special honor as a member of the family, and the staff there are treated as family. They sit down at lunchtime and have lunch together.
Are you talking about at the museum or the
this
foundation?
is at the foundation.
At the foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They sit down and have lunch together every day. It's part of the tradition of Italy and the foundation itself to have this interchange between the people that are working together. It's a very different culture. Wonderful, actually.
That's
Things are
great.
slower and friendlier.
Than Boston? You're kidding. Well, speaking of Boston, I want to talk about your work, Mike. You're very modest, and you said you're, an up-and-coming artist. But I'd love to talk a little bit about the kind of work that you do.
Thank you. Well, I haven't been working at it as long as Jeff. And as you say, I'm a software engineer. I have a regular job. But I do have a studio practice, and I have a studio in Boston where I investigate video feedback effects. And well, I've been doing this, off and on for a couple years now. I have a video, if the control room is available to do this, of something that I worked on about a month ago, in which I am performing in front of a video screen, a video monitor, just like this in fact, and creating effects with my hands that occur only within the television set and not outside. You can see, actually, as soon as the video starts rolling, we'll get going. This is a sculptural piece I created with a 46-inch LCD screen and 7 monitors surrounding it. You can't really see the entire piece itself. But what I've done here is I've connected a camera to the TV set and pointed the camera at the set and adjusted it in such a way that I can create visual effects just by moving my hands in front of the screen.
Huh. So how are those effects created? Is that heat?
No, it's not. It's what's pure video feedback. So by aligning the image that is seen by the camera onto the onto the device itself, what we're seeing actually is that even though there are many copies of my hand being projected onto my hand, you cannot see that actually because my hand diffuses that effect. But on the surface of the screen, on the light surface, it's very pronounced. And so I can manipulate that with my hands and not have my hands interfere, so to speak, with the images themselves.
Now, I just saw some text up there. It said light has liquid properties.
It does.
Can you explain that?
Okay. When you start a video feedback session, what happens is that what's in the focus of the camera is reproduced on top of itself many times, 30 times a second. And what that does is it exaggerates very slight differences, very slight movements that occur maybe from the wind hitting the camera or from people walking by in the next room, moving the floor, and that moves the monitor. They're very subtle effects that cause this gelatinous kind of entity on the screen to move slightly. And that slight movement is very similar to water movement because it's almost as if you're creating a fluid substance. I'm sorry, it's difficult to explain.
So it sounds like it's a combination of your hand movement,
yes,
plus whatever other energetic or physical movement or
in some cases
in that space.
And my hands are creating the initial light bit that occurs on the screen, and then I can manipulate it and exaggerate it and make it, bigger or move it in different positions.
Now, where was this exhibited? This piece?
It has not been exhibited yet.
Okay. So
It's on YouTube.
Oh, it's on. Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Now, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that text. Do you remember? Did you see what it said?
No software was written
No
to
software
create
was
the
written.
effects.
A lot of times
okay.
people ask me, because I'm an engineer, they ask me, what kind of filter did you use or what program are you writing to create these effects? And I'm not. This is done with equipment that can be bought at Circuit City, and you just put it all up and adjust it a particular way, which is difficult to explain, but you can create these effects.
If they ever make a movie of Doctor Strange, these would be great hand blasts.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, how did you get into doing video artistry?
Well, I do a lot of sound and video work myself. About 4 years ago, I had this piece called Melodicon, which I've actually presented here on SPG at SCAT. And what that did was it combined sound and light and actually changed sound into light, so it could create graphic images based on the sound that was occurring at that moment. And when I was experimenting with that tool, I was using a projector and a camera, because the camera would sense from the video and change, based on the sound that was occurring at that moment, would change the video properties. And while I was experimenting with that system, I just so happened to point the camera at the projection, just accidentally, and it caused all these feedback reactions, and I suddenly became interested in that. That was 4 years ago, and I haven't lost interest in it yet.
Wow.
And it's just remarkable because I have a very short attention span. But I keep finding new effects. Like every new piece of hardware I connect to the system creates a new different effect. And it's my theory that the number of types of effects you can create is a function of the multiplication of all these different devices that exist in the world. So it's a huge, that's mainly not experimented with. I mean, this is territory that has not been really explored, basically because a lot of these devices are coming out in the market just now. I mean, handheld camcorders are ubiquitous now, and they weren't in the past. And so I think that as an artist, it's my obligation to play with all of them and to try to create new effects with them.
So you have a studio in Boston.
That's right, in Fort Point.
Oh, excellent. And I know that there's, I think like every, I don't know,
Oh yeah,
every
we have
week or
what's
every
called
month,
Art Walk twice a year.
Twice a year, right, okay.
Basically, these are events where people go through and they're looking for sculpture or paintings or knickknacks. And there are about 300 or 400 artists in that area, so it's a pretty good possibility that somebody's going to find something they like. On the other hand, they walk into my space and they see this gelatinous thing going on the TV monitor, and they say, yeah, I can't buy that. I say, you're right, you can't. It's not for sale. But I get my audience that way. I turn people on to the stuff that I'm trying to do, and I also get a good opportunity to explain myself and to introduce these concepts to people who had never imagined that such a thing could exist.
So what's next for you?
I have no idea, but I'm excited to looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I work with models, and so I set up multiple projectors, and what I'm experimenting with now is the interaction or the interplay, Moire effects that can occur between the interference patterns between projectors. And so you can create emergent properties without any initial graphics whatsoever, and just create a wild scene basically because the two projectors are inconsistent with each other.
Now, did your work with Jeff in Italy, did that give you any new ideas? Did it inspire you in any way?
Well, Jeff's work always inspires me. I haven't literally ripped anything off from him yet, but it's probably inevitable.
I think it's interesting that you work with video feedback and I work with sound feedback.
That's true. That's true. And so what I got from Italy, a lot of like the performances from the NIME, which I don't know if we'll get to those videos tonight. But I was able to see what other people are doing with their other alternative forms of musical expression, which has been an interest to me. And so it gave me kind of a perspective on my own work where I was thinking, well, these people are approaching the problem from their own points of view, and they're doing something that's relevant to their own themes. What should I be doing? Shouldn't I be doing the same kind of thing? Like, I wasn't looking at their work and saying, well, I should try that myself. I was saying, well, what can I do to come out of my box in the same way that these people have, obviously, and the way Jeff has in his own career. So, I mean, these experiences where you're interacting with other artists, you're seeing people in a particular stage in their career, you can't really see them emerge or evolving through their career, but you can see where they are and kind of imagine what would I be in that situation? How would I get to that point myself?
So did you have an opportunity to interact with other artists at the conference?
Personally, not very much.
You were busy.
Yeah, we're with the installation.
Very busy, but yeah, I talked to a few.
He did, yeah.
Yeah. So again, NIME is the New Interfaces for Musical Expression. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I understand, again, you were a featured artist there. So can you tell us just a little bit about the conference itself?
Well, it's an organization that brings together people who have an interest in these new interfaces and new ways of dealing with musical expression. And as I mentioned before, they use computer quite a bit as an interface or as a means of controlling materials. But beyond that, there were all sorts of sensor-built materials. Sometimes they looked like musical instruments and sounded something like them. Other times they were using cell phones.
Actually, we could run the video in the background and
that'd be great
see
if we
what's
could
going
do that.
on.
Yeah, to better understand what.
I mean, they really work with just about anything you can imagine to try to create their idea in how you can control musical expression. And I think the wonderful thing about the conference is that it brought together over 200 people. The book that they published at the end it's this thick. It's huge. It's a tome, and it's all just this year's research in that area. And they're doing this every single year. So if you look at 5 years of catalogs, you've got thousands.
Build
really,
a shelf
you know?
for it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really wonderful because you can go to one place and find all of this at once. Whereas if you were to look at each piece individually and try to dig it up, it would take you years, literally, to be able to come into contact with all of this.
200 artists now. Where are they from? Are
Worldwide.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
This is a piece by Yolanda Harris. What she did was she has a device.
That's
the man,
Yolandi right there.
That's Yolandi. And so the man is holding a piece of electronics which is apparently connected to the satellites that are circling the globe. And Yolanda has mapped her own sounds to the changing variable azimuth and signal strength properties of the satellites that are picked up by this device. So you put it on your headphones and you walk around and you listen to the sounds.
It becomes a musical composition, and it's different every time you do it because you go into different zones, you stay longer in different places, the signal strengths are different, and that is all mapped into creating a musical context by her programming.
Wow. So this is somebody who's just visiting the museum. He's not a part of the exhibit.
Well, the exhibit consisted of everyone standing around and everyone trying it out.
Okay.
That's what the exhibit
Right.
is.
Yeah, she's explaining it here.
Okay.
There's the satellite number.
And where is she from? Do you know?
She's living in Amsterdam. She's from Britain.
Okay.
0 to 360. And it's signal strength.
Interesting.
And so those are the 4 parameters.
Now, had you met some of these artists before? Since you
Updates every
I didn't know Yolandi. I know her boyfriend, though, as it turns out. I didn't know that they were together. I just met Yolandi. Eddie Shankin, who I run into at conferences everywhere, it seems like, or just attending concerts. That's Eddie right there with the beard. He's a writer on pardon?
The younger beard, go ahead.
Yeah.
right.
He's a writer on new media. Wonderful writer.
Is New Media a publication?
No. He was with Leonardo for years. I'm not sure if he's still with them, but he writes generally on new media.
Right. Okay.
And art and the arts.
Right. Okay.
New media being a term that
Right.
suggests, technology in the arts and so on.
I see. Okay. Okay. So this is quite interactive. This doesn't exist on its own.
No, you have to move
yeah.
around to get this one.
Right. Okay.
And there's the sea. This is the front lawn of the museum.
Wow. Yeah. Now, is this in Bogliasco or
This is in Genoa.
This is in Genoa.
Yeah, Bogliasco is right next to Genoa.
Okay.
If you go to the east, it's the first community beyond Genoa.
Il resto la prossima puntata.
Okay.
Questo è il computer e batteria da tenere insieme. E quella è l'antenna e tu gira.
So, Jeff, what's next for you?
Well, Mirror of the Moon has a second life.
Oh,
I'm
good.
pleased to say. It's going into an auction, a benefit auction. We're going to sell one copy of it for the benefit of the Hudson Valley Center for Contemporary Arts. That will be at Yvonne Lambert Gallery on 21st Street in Chelsea, New York City, October 5th.
Excellent.
So if you want to buy a nice video of what you saw tonight, that's where you can get it.
Fantastic. So it's just the video. You won't be installing the piece again.
Well, it'll be installed this time without the marble projector, the marble and the projection, but we've installed on a flat screen monitor.
I see. Okay. Now you're going to invite Mike to come help you do that?
No, they'll put it
He
up.
likes New
They'll
York.
put it up for me, but I'll invite him to come down to the show.
Oh,
so-
great.
Okay, great.
Great.
Yep.
This is one of the performances that happened. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact information to explain the
What is
performer's
that?
name. Well, these are instruments that apparently have been made for this particular purpose, for this, perhaps just this piece, but it seems to be an improvisational form. They were reading off of what seemed to be a script or some kind of playbook, but the sounds they were creating were quite unusual.
Well, the instruments are quite unusual.
Absolutely. I was amazed by the sculptural elements of these. And you can see he's turning knobs, pressing buttons, touching. Some of this might be theatrics, but
Yeah.
I do hear some differences, like when he just waves his hand next to it, not even touching it. You can hear, like he's not even touching the instrument.
I can see that, yeah.
So it has,
It's
it works kind of like
sensor-based.
a theremin, if you've ever heard of that. It's an instrument where you can walk around it and gesture around it, and it will make sounds based on the distance between your hand and the electronic device. It senses the electronic pulses from your hands.
Interesting.
The video is a little kind of bumpy, and I apologize.
Well, you were shoved back in a corner there, I remember.
Absolutely, it was not. And the woman to the left
Yeah.
has this enormous, contraption that she's holding onto. I just wish I could have documented these instruments
It's
more,
vaguely
because-
bassoon-like.
Yes. So she's blowing into it, but then has the same kind of controls that this guy on the right side has.
Right.
This is a piece called the Pencil Project, and this was, it was amusing and creative. They connected microphones underneath the desks, I believe. So as they were drawing, they were making these loud sounds.
Now,
They're also-
are these just regular, sort of people wandering around the museum, or are these?
No, these are
these are the
performers.
actual art.
These are
This is in a
performers for
concert
night.
hall, actually.
In a concert hall
okay.
at the Paganini. I forget what
Paganini House.
Yes. So what they were doing is they were creating audio feedback, and it's kind of a difficult thing to control, but as you become louder and louder, the sounds cascade upon themselves, and they have control. You can see that they're touching a little control on the side, which controls the volume or the intensity of the effect. But I thought they were very expressive and kind of playful.
They had a good time with it.
They were,
Yeah.
doing
It was a performance.
it was a performance, right?
But there's some
Now,
theater
Jeff
in it
pointed
too,
out
as well.
that it had been done before, but I consider, if it's done well enough, it could be done again.
Well, it's differently.
Yeah.
It's done differently this
Yeah.
time.
Now, Jeff, you started off as a musician, a
Yes.
composer.
Yeah.
What kind of work did you do?
I was
as a
writing
composer?
chamber music mostly, a little orchestral music, solo piano songs. I mean, it was a completely different career. I mean, I was conducting orchestras in universities, and I just felt like I wasn't in touch with the kind of people that I wanted to be in touch with. It wasn't out in the world enough, and I felt that getting into the gallery scene really made a big difference. I found that the audiences there were nowhere near as held back. They weren't conservative. They seemed to really want to go with things and try things very much.
Now, can you see yourself maybe bringing back some of your own music, meaning
Actually,
playing and participating?
well, actually, I've had choruses sing with my work in large churches. And in April or May, I don't have the date next year, in Cologne Cathedral in
Cologne, Germany.
Yeah, in Cologne, Germany. I'm putting up a massive work in the entire cathedral, and
Wow.
the chorus will be singing with that work.
Fantastic.
So I have to figure out how that's going to work now, but yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm also
great.
looking forward to the merger of these two different areas of my work.
Fantastic. Good. So that's next spring
That'll
or
be
summer?
in the spring, yeah, April or May.
Okay. Now, how long have you been doing this kind of, traveling around the world and?
Well, my first
showing your-
installation was in New York in 1999. The first European was in 2003. And I've been very fortunate in Germany. They've been very good to me. I've been going there maybe 3 times, 4 times a year.
That's great.
And putting up maybe 2 or 3 installations a year, something like that.
Fantastic. So where can we find more about you? You have a website?
Yeah, my name, Jeff Tallman, JEFFTALMAN,
Great.
www.jefftallman.com.
Great. So we'll look forward to seeing much more of you.
Please do, yep.
Excellent.
Thanks so much.
Good. Yeah, it's great to have you guys here. So Mike, again, what I want to hear more about next
What's
steps,
next?
and for you, yeah, mycallvideo.com.
mycallvideo.com.
Yeah.
My studio, unfortunately, will have to move coming in November because of the changes that are occurring at Fort Point these days. There's a gentrification happening, and a lot of artists are being pushed out. I'm one of them. I knew my lease was going to be up. So I have to, it's a 300 square foot space. It's not really big enough for me. So basically in the next year I'm going to have to figure out a new space and make that sculptural contraption that I have with the monitors, put that somewhere else.
Yeah.
And probably also some performances and some exhibits, but nothing really planned yet.
Okay. Now, what about opportunities for you two to work again in the future? Do you see any?
Well, I'm sure we'll find some.
Yeah.
you know.
Whatever happens.
Yeah, they seem to keep coming. So when they come and they're the right ones, I'll give Mike a call, and if he's available.
Yeah.
And if it's in Europe, yeah.
That's great.
I always love a trip to New York, and and we have a good time. I mean, we have a lot of fun doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens, we have to work 24 hours straight, but when you're doing something you love, there's nothing like it.
Right. So did it end up being a vacation or not?
It was a working vacation. I put all of my energy that I had into the installation.
Yeah.
But then halfway through the week we were done, and so I could relax and we could really enjoy it, and just take part of these performances. In this case, it's a piece where this guy has paddles, so he's pushing next to each other and creating sounds that way, just by the location of the paddles. So it's an incredible experience, and I'd do it again.
Well, Pittsburgh, 2009.
Is that right?
That's where the next 9
I don't know
right.
if Pittsburgh is Genoa, but I'll go. I'll go.
Doesn't quite have the same appeal as the Mediterranean, does it?
Maybe not.
Yeah. So were there any, contemporary musicians there, playing the piano,
Nothing
doing
so
chorus?
conventional.
Well, these are all contemporary musicians.
Right. Oh, okay.
They're playing
Yeah.
a very contemporary music, actually, which is probably one reason why it sounds so out to
Right.
us.
Right. Well, good. Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for taking us along to Italy and talking about your work. This has been a real pleasure to have you here, Jeff Tallman, Mike Hall.
And thank you, Zohar,
Zohar.
Thank
for
you.
hosting this.
Thank you very much. This has been great. Well, we look forward to seeing you next time on Dead Air Live. Thank you very much for joining us.